All right, welcome back to the channel, family. And today, what we're gonna get into is installing a clutch. First, we're gonna have to take it apart. I went ahead and ordered the Z1 Motorsports clutch package, and I'm super juiced because I checked on it. It's gonna be in tomorrow midday. So I got it in the garage now, the G, and I'm gonna go ahead and take the transmission out in preparation for this clutch that's about to arrive. So again, I'm hella happy that the clutch is coming in tomorrow. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started on this now. First, we're gonna start right here inside, taking the shifter apart. So I'm gonna take that shifter assembly apart and take the shifter out. That way we can drop the transmission down and back without it hanging up. So we're gonna start there on the inside. Then I'm gonna go ahead and jack the vehicle up out here, all four corners. So that way we could get underneath and start working on that transmission. All right, so I'm gonna jump right to it right now. Tell you about the clutch that I got though. Again, Z1 Motorsports clutch. It's gonna be a full face sprung clutch, but with a street performance clutch pack. And then I got the mid-weight flywheel. I didn't go with the lightweight flywheel because I really didn't want to have chatter when I'm driving, just because I have kids. You guys know if you're following the channel, I have kids. They're always riding with me. I want them to be comfortable. I want to shift as normal as possible without a lot of chatter. It's not like a race car or anything, but we're gonna end up probably boosting this application in the future. So we got enough clamping power. I think it's 500 foot-pounds clamping force with the clutch that we're getting. And the flywheel is a 21-pound flywheel. So it's mid-weight. I think the lightweight's a 14, but we got the 21. And the 31 is OEM flywheel. So it's a significant 10-pound drop in weight on the flywheel. So that should help with acceleration. But enough talking, let's jump right into it and get to taking out this shifter. All right, I'm gonna cut back to y'all when I'm inside taking the shifter out. All right, fam, so we're inside here. We're gonna go ahead and start here with the shifter, and we're gonna start with taking the shifter knob off. We just simply turn it counterclockwise until it unscrews. It may be a little harder on a stock shifter knob, but this one's been on and off several times, so no issues here getting that off just by turning it counterclockwise. So we're going to go ahead and continue here. I'm going to pop out this trim piece. I believe it just pops up and back. All right, and then on the back here you'll see a connector. This will be for your cigarette lighter, and then you have one here for your hazards. So you just unplug those. We're just going to set this assembly aside. All right, so pretty simple. We're already here at the top of the shift boot. We'll take this little, really just noise damper off here, little insulation, so get that out of the way. Put some more insulation here. Remove that as well. Now that we got the shift boot off and we got the insulation out of the way there, there's 4 10mm bolts here that you need to take out. So I'm gonna go ahead and take those out now. Alright, so just save those for later. Alright, now that we got the 10mm bolts out, all 4 of them are out of the way, we're going to go ahead and pull this shift boot out. But we're going to need to grab something to get underneath and pry it up because it's on there pretty good. So I'm going to try just using a pick tool right now. So it's got a little angle on it. See the little angle there? So I'm just going to try to get under it at an angle and pry up. So that seems like it's freeing it up pretty good. So we'll just work our way around and loosen it up. Don't want to tear the shift boot, so you don't want to pull on the shift boot directly. All right. Get the ring out and get the boot.
throw that out of the way.
What we're gonna do is just go ahead and set you guys up on the tripod there on the camera, and then we're gonna do a time lapse of getting this thing jacked up. We're not gonna waste a lot of time there in the video. And then once it's jacked up, I'll cut back to you guys when we're taking the exhaust apart and dropping the transmission down. We'll see how bad this clutch is. So let's go ahead and jump right into this work and get this transmission out, because I want to get it prepped and ready for this new clutch. I can't wait to swing this thing again with all its power. So I want to go ahead and try to get this done today. All right, so I'm going to cut back to you guys when we're underneath the vehicle. All right, family, so we got the vehicle jacked up here. We're getting ready to go and take this transmission out. I'm just hand holding the camera right now because I want to get this done. But we got the jack stands underneath. As a matter of fact, I've done doubled up on jack stands on almost every corner, if you can see here. And the reason I do that is because I don't trust jack stands. I've never had one fail, but I don't trust them. So see, you got a jack stand there, and I left the jack in place on this right side of the vehicle. But better safe than sorry. I ain't trying to catch a G35 to the face this morning, so we're gonna go ahead and double up our jack stands. So let's go ahead and jump underneath and see what we're dealing with. Again, I want to knock this out as fast as possible. Let's see if we get some light on here. All right. All right, so we're gonna climb under here and take a look at what's in our way. Couple things I see initially. One would be these O2 sensors. So I'm just gonna disconnect here at these connectors. There's two of them. I'm gonna take this bolt out as well as the bracket. That way it's not interfering with our jack placement. I don't want it teeter-tottering on this bolt, so we'll go ahead and get that out the way. There's a couple brackets here that need to be disconnected that are holding some harness. So we'll go ahead and take those out as well, and just basically free up the transmission of anything that's in the way. We'll go ahead and disconnect the slave cylinder as well. That's over here. So we'll go ahead and disconnect that. Up front, I don't see anything else really in the way besides that. Looks like a fairly easy disassembly. Again, this is the first time I've ever done the clutch in a G35, so it's all a learning experience for me. But I've done several transmission clutches and so on, so I'm not too concerned about it. We do have the drive line here we're going to have to take out, so I want to note that you're going to mark this here with some chalk or a marker or something of some sort to clock this flange here mount on this rear shaft flange. So when you take the front drive line, it's a two-piece. I'm going to note that there's two drive lines here with a carrier bearing in the center. And the reason why you want to go ahead and mark it here is because when this assembly was balanced, it was balanced as a complete unit. And if you go ahead and disconnect it here and you reclock it in the wrong position, you have a good chance of having a vibration throughout the car. Not only will you have an annoying vibration, but it'll cause premature wear of this carrier bearing here in the middle, and it could destroy U-joints. So you want to go ahead and make sure you put it back in the same orientation that you took it apart. So we're going to go ahead and mark it with a line here, so that way when we take it apart it goes back exactly the same. So that's one thing to note. Other than that, looks like it'll be a pretty easy clutch to do. So I'm going to go ahead and get started now by grabbing some tools and dropping this Y pipe. So I'll cut back to you guys when I'm getting this Y pipe out. All right, family. So I got interrupted here in getting my tools ready to take this transmission out. But it was a good interruption because we got a delivery of our Z1 Motorsports clutch. So we got the whole clutch pack here ready to go in. Happy about that. Not only that, but I didn't even tell you guys about this other order, which is my Aeromotive fuel tank. This is going to be for the 64 Skylark. Y'all can see it there. And it's got the 340 liter pump. So 340 liters, that should support about 700 horsepower. So that's plenty of pump for what we're going to be using it for. But yeah, we got our Stealth Aeromotive pump and fuel tank for the Skylark. So really happy today. Got a lot of parts delivered. Now I got to start doing some work. Skylark again is on timeout until we get time to work on it. I got a lot of other things that I'm working on, but the 33 is running. It's running phenomenal. The Audi's running, although we're going to be doing some maintenance work to that here soon. We're going to do the brakes. I'm going to do an exhaust upgrade on that. That'll be coming up soon. And then I think I have a hub bearing that I need to get done on that. So we'll get that in another video. For now, we're going to jump back here to the G35. And then the Camaro is eventually going to get some love. I got to really tune in the engine. I just haven't taken the time to put a good tune on it. And then once I get a good decent bass tune on it, we'll take it into the dyno and get it dyno tuned. And then once that's all done, we'll go ahead and start doing the body work here and get that squared away so we can paint it and get the hood on and everything. And it'll be pretty much done after that. I have the interior. You can see there's pieces of it here. I have the seats. And I have everything for the interior. I'm not going to put it in until I get the body work done. Right now it's just being stored. All right, so let me jump back into this G35 here and get this old clutch out, get the new one going in. Probably won't get it done today, just to be honest, because of bandwidth, but I'm going to cut it all together in one video so you guys be able to see it done and complete and driving hopefully here soon in this video here. But for now, let me jump right back to it and get this transmission out, all right? Alright, so now that we got the wide pipe out, you can see we have clear access to our transmission mount in the cross member here. We're going to take those out, but before we do that, we're going to disconnect some sensors. So starting with the O2 sensor and then all this other harness here that's connected to the transmission. We'll go ahead and loosen all those up as well. So we're going to start here with disconnecting the O2 sensors. There's two of them, so we'll just leave that hang out of the way, and then we're going to unbolt this whole harness and lay it over to the side. So see, it's connected to the bracket right here, so we're going to have to pry it out. Every good mechanic should have a pocket screwdriver. That comes in handy in these cases. You just push in on the tab here and then slide it off the bracket. That way we can spread them apart here and have more room to continue our work. Alright, so I got you guys at a little bit different angle here so we could see the slave cylinder coming out. So we got these two 12mm bolts. Again, we want to go ahead and make sure that piston doesn't come out of its bore, otherwise we're going to get fluid everywhere and we'll probably damage the seal. Which will cost us a new slave cylinder, which we're going to upgrade the slave cylinder in the future anyways, especially with a heavier clutch. I don't anticipate it lasting too much longer, but I just don't have that part today, so we're going to have to reuse this slave cylinder. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel some kind of way always saying slave cylinder, but we won't go into politics. Alright. So I like to just
just keep constant pressure on it myself. And then obviously, I mean, maybe it's not obvious, but you don't want someone to step on the pedal, so you make sure no one's in the vehicle. You step on the clutch pedal now, and this whole assembly is going to come apart. So make sure you note that. What I like to do is just take a zip tie here. I'm not even sure if you guys can see this, but I take a zip tie, put it around this push pin on the end of this rod here, and I'll just zip tie it down to where the bolt hole is. Now I'm sure there's other methods people use. This is just what I've used. Alright, and we don't want to put a lot of pressure here, you just want to hold it from popping out. So I find that just holds it in place. So you can see there, it just kind of holds it in place so it doesn't pop out of its bore. And then we're just going to move it out of the way. Yeah, for now we're going to hang it. I got to take this shield off anyways. So let's get this shield out of the way. I think where I'm going to go now is take these two front facing bolts out. Let's see how tight they are. Yeah. Not so tight, so we'll just take them out with a wrench. We're going to use our impact to go ahead and zip out the rest of these bell housing bolts all the way around. I'm not sure if there's any up top. It looks like there's one up top there that also needs to come out, probably on both sides. And then we'll go ahead and put a jack under so we could get this transmission mount out here and disconnect the transmission mount in this and get this out of the way. And again, we're going to have to take the tail shaft or the drive line out of the tail shaft. But again, we want to go ahead and clock our drive line. So we're going to mark it here so that way we know how to put it back together so there's no vibration when the job's done. All right, so let me go ahead and get that started. I'm going to probably start with bell housing bolts. I want to do that and get everything done, and the last thing I'm going to do is pull this drive line out because you don't want to work underneath the tail shaft if there's fluid dripping out of it. There's a good chance of oil coming out, so we don't want to work with oil dripping on us. So we'll do as much as we can before we take that apart. So we're going to do the bell housing now, and we're going to go to do put the transmission jack underneath and then take this transmission mount out. And then we'll do the drive line, and then we'll be freed up, and we should be able to just drop the transmission down and out. So, all right, guys and gals, so what we have here, this is probably my favorite tool when doing a transmission. So we got 1/2-inch drive here to fit our impact gun, and it's 4 feet long. And if you look at the other side, it's a 3/8 drive to fit our swivel. So, and the swivel is important because obviously we want to get those angles. So what we're going to do is fish this through this opening here, right above the transmission mount near the tail shaft, and we're going to go all the way up through here to hit that top transmission bolt. So let's see if I could get you guys a good angle here so you can see what's happening. I apologize if you can't see, but you get the gist of it. So we're just going to fish it up through here to locate that top transmission bolt. One day, guys, I'm going to have a lift in this garage, or I'm going to have a shop. Well, I actually already have a shop. It's just not in the Bay Area. So I rent that one out. But one of these days I'll have a shop here in the Bay Area where I could use it to support my YouTube channel and getting these projects done a little more efficiently, but working from our back is never comfortable. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get that one there. Again with the long extension here. You see it? The POV. All the way up there to the bell housing bolt. So we're going to zip that one out real quick. So we want to go ahead and mark this out. I just used some chalk here. I got some from Home Depot. Always should have some chalk in your toolbox. And we're just going to mark it out here somewhere, just so we know where to clock this when we put it back together. So as you can see there, we just mark it out. Really simple, but it could be a costly mistake if you don't mark it. Because if you do, once again, install it and it's not installed as the way it was taken apart, you could get a real bad vibration and subsequently damage this carrier bearing or wear it out prematurely, as well as wear out your U-joints and get a horrible vibration throughout the car. So you want to make sure it's clocked right. That keeps the shaft in balance with the dual shafts here. All right, so let's go ahead and take these bolts out and get this out of the way, and then get our jack under there and drop this transmission down. Alright, so we're back at it. Got the parking brake off now, so I can actually turn this shaft and reach the rest of these bolts. Now it is a 17 millimeter. I'm kind of cheating today because I'm using an impact, but again, you could do these with hand tools, but I'm trying to get it done as soon as possible. So I'm going to use an impact. Make sure you don't lose your bolts and nuts and all your washers. Those are all important. Alright, and our last one here. Use a little pry bar here to pop this out. It may be loose enough to just wiggle. Yeah. So, all right. Now we'll pull the shaft out. Hopefully we don't make a super big mess. All right. So we got the jack in place. So now we got the cross member bolts loose. We're just gonna lower this back end a little. So all right, fam, we got the transmission drop down as far as we can with our limited space. So we're gonna move on up to the front here and get ready to take out the clutch. So that'd be the clutch pressure plate, the clutch disc, and actually the flywheel too. So we're gonna replace all three items there. And then we're going to head over here and replace the throwout bearing. Now we'll retain the clutch fork because it is a cast clutch fork, so it should be strong. I'm not worried about that breaking. And then we'll button it all back up and hopefully be able to get it on the road and see how it drives, breaking this clutch. All right, so let me jump back to it. All right, so now we're going to take the clutch disc out. I got to take this pressure plate off first. There's a clutch disc in the center, so you want to make sure that doesn't fall out the bottom. It may hit you. So just be aware there's a second piece in here. There's the pressure plate and then the clutch disc. Once we take these 12 millimeter bolts out all the way around this pressure plate, that clutch disc may fall. So Be prepared for that. Put your hand underneath. Don't let it fall and hit you in the face. Or you can hold it in the center here and just catch both of them at the same time with your finger through the center. But anyways, we're gonna buzz these 12 millimeters off real quick. All right, fam, so we got the old clutch parts here on the bench. We have the clutch pressure plate, the friction disc, and the flywheel here. It's a dual mass flywheel. You can see here how there's two different sections of it, and in between it's kind of on a hub. So I'm not sure if that movement is normal. It seems a little loose to me, but either way, we're going to be replacing this dual mass flywheel with a single mass flywheel, and it's going to be lighter weight. So instead of a 31-pound flywheel, we're going with a 21-pound flywheel. And it's going to be coming from Z1 Motorsports. You can check them out, z1motorsports.com. So anyways, they're going to be like your premier supplier for the Z cars and the G35s and so on. So let's go ahead and open this up and see what we got. We should have everything to get this job complete, but we'll do an unboxing. All right, seems like it's packaged well. They put plenty of packaging in here to keep things cushioned on the way. I believe this came from Georgia. We're here on Cali on the West Coast, and it looks like all the parts are here and, knock on wood, not damaged. I'm a little hesitant now. I see a box open with nothing inside, so hopefully whatever was in here is at the bottom, or perhaps here. So this will be the throw out bearing. It doesn't look damaged, but it certainly fell out of the box. I don't see any issues there. So that's going to be replaced also. We haven't pulled that out yet, but we'll go ahead and get that replaced. And then some promotional stuff here. But we got our friction disc here, wrapped in plastic. It's a full face. I didn't go with the 6-puck. I believe they had a 6-puck, but I didn't go with that. I didn't really want to deal with the chatter. I went with a full face and sprung. Some pretty beefy springs in there, but at least it's sprung, so it helps minimize the chatter, especially with the lightweight flywheel, which we'll get to here next. So we'll just set these aside. So there's our clutch disc. Let's take a look at it, compare it to the old one. We won't take a lot of time here because we want to go ahead and get this done. So it's definitely a little wider, a little more circumference there on that new disc. It appears to have more friction area. Just kind of looking at it here, you can see the gap there. There's a little more friction area, I think, on this one as well. So hopefully get some better holding power than this stock one. So we'll go ahead and keep looking through the box, see what we got here. So we have our lightweight flywheel. I want to see how much lighter it is. I'm not going to measure it though. I'm not going to like get a scale or anything. I'm just going to pick it up. Oh my goodness. It is about 10 pounds lighter for sure. And like I said, it doesn't have this wonky like two-piece action going on with the dual mass. It's one single mass. So that's that there. Put those side by side. But yeah, a little worried by the surface difference here, unless for some reason this hub sits down lower, which brings it at the right height. But either way, it's supposed to be for this vehicle, so I'm gonna put it in and see what it looks like. But you could see the difference here when it comes to where the tooth height is for the starter motor.
but if I were to raise it up, it would match up with this sensors ring here for the crank. So, all right, either way, even though it's a little off there, we're going to continue on. I'm going to put this together. Hopefully that doesn't become a problem down the road. But let's continue. Oh, note here that this is covered with some anti-rust inhibitor. So you want to go ahead and spray it down and clean off all this oil before installing it. All right. So this should be our pressure plate. All right, cool. So before we look at the pressure plate, I want to show you here, we get the installment tool. So you got the clutch alignment tool here, which will simulate your input shaft on your transmission and hold everything in place while you tighten the clutch up and torque everything in place. So that kind of pilots that clutch to be in the right position so that input shaft of transmission goes in nice and smoothly. And on the end here, you can see they have their pilot bearing. So that's a replacement pilot. So that's the replacement pilot bearing there. We'll take the old one out and drive this one in, and then lube everything up and put it back together. But anyways, you get the clutch alignment tool, and then the pilot bearing. So we'll set those aside. Take a look at the clutch. I should say the pressure plate here. All right, so again, just like the flywheel, the pressure plate will have to be cleaned before installation. They have a rust inhibitor on here. And to get the best performance from your clutch and to have it break in properly, you want to make sure you get all that oil, grease, and inhibitor off. Make sure it's nice and clean. So let's take a look at it. It's coated in a red paint. I'm assuming it's probably a powder coat. And that's about it. Nothing to signify that it's a Z1 Motorsports clutch or anything. It doesn't say anything on it. But that's the pressure plate. Again, this one here is rated at 500 foot-pounds of clamping force. So I don't know what stock is, but this should be significantly more. I'd assume stock was probably around 300 foot-pounds. But anyways, this is 500 foot-pounds. We got the full face again disc with it's being sprung versus the unsprung. I don't want chatter, so we went with the sprung full face. Then we have the flywheel here. So it does say Z1 on the back, and it is for VQ35DE, so it is for our engine. So I don't have any issues with putting it on, wondering if it's going to fit. Although the teeth did not look like it lined up just laying on the bench here and comparing to the old one. I'm assured that it's going to fit, so we'll go ahead and put that in. Let's see what else might be in this box. Got some paper here. Oh yeah, I forgot about this. So I got a new line also for our slave cylinder. So I got a new hydraulic line there. It's in steel braid, but plastic coated in a blue. Looks cool. Hopefully I have enough time to put this in, but really just working on getting the clutch together because my Audi is going to go down for a service in a future video, like I said earlier, and I need a car to drive. So all right, fam, so I'm going to jump right back to it and get these parts put in. But before that, I got to clean up the bell housing in the back of the engine, get it all degreased, and get it ready to receive these new parts. Once I put the parts in, I'm going to put it all together and then hopefully get this thing done tonight. So I'm going to jump right to it. But before we put it in, I want to note there is a hole here which is going to line up with an alignment pin on the back of the crank. So make sure you have this keyed correctly with the alignment pin on the back of the crank. So let's get under there now and get this lined up and then put that clutch assembly together as well. I'm going to wipe some of my grease off of here. All right, let's go ahead and put this in now. And I wanted to cut back to you guys real quick because I didn't show you that there's a pilot bearing back here that needs to be replaced too. I showed you that when we were looking at the new parts, but that needs to come out. So you can use a slide hammer with a claw, and like a 2-claw slide hammer attachment, and then hammer that out with a slide hammer. However, we don't have much space for a slide hammer, so I'm going to be using this tool today. I'm not even sure what it's called. Some of you mechanics probably seen these before, but it's essentially like a race puller or a seal puller. So I have a MAC number here, S120. So again, that's a MAC tool. S120. Again, that's a MAC tool. S120 is the part number. But it's, I know I've had this thing for many years, so hopefully that part number is still good. But anyways, it essentially hooks in there on that pilot bearing, and then you hammer it out. But yeah, you want to hook it in there essentially and hammer it out. So let's see if I can do this on my back. Alright, and we want to make sure we're pulling evenly and not cocking it in there. So we'll try to pull it from this angle too. Because of my angle, it might take me a little bit here to get it out, because I just can't get a full swing on this hammer. But we're going to keep working patiently here. Try to get this thing out. All right. There we go. And we did it without hitting our hand. So let's show you guys that there. So we're just trying to get this pilot bearing out. Let me show you what it looks like. So here's the tool. Hopefully you guys can see it. It has a little hook, and you're going to put it inside the center of that pilot bearing, and then hook it on the back side there, just like that. And then you're going to hammer on it on this side here while holding on the handle, and it'll eventually drive it right out. All right, for the next part, we're going to put this new pilot bearing back in. So we're going to just start this by kind of getting it started with our hand, and then we're going to just tap it in lightly with the face of the hammer. Hopefully you guys can see it there. Try to go in evenly. So just to kind of get it started. And then we're going to take, what I'm using is about a 14mm, but you want to check the fit before you use it. But you want to get a socket that's going to fit around the whole circumference of this pilot bearing, as to not mar it and hit it in evenly. You're going to use that socket to drive it in. I like to get a socket just a hair smaller than the pilot bearing, so I know it doesn't get stuck in the crank when I'm hammering in. Shouldn't go that deep, but we want to make sure we get it driven all the way in. Alright, so we're going to hammer on it here. Again, trying to go in evenly and flat the whole time. Check in every now and then that everything's going fine and that you're not getting cockeyed, because you want this straight. And when it bottoms out, you'll hear it kind of change tone. You hear it gets a little higher pitch. So we're bottomed out there. That's a new pilot bearing in there. And what we're going to do is
grease it up now before we forget. That'll help aid the input shaft of the transmission going into that pilot bearing smoothly and help it maintain a good long life and not wear out prematurely. So we'll get that lubed up before we forget, because it's easy to forget. We'll do that now. So now that we got the pilot bearing installed, we want to take some high temperature grease. Today I'm using the Valvoline. This is the red grease. It's a high temperature one. We're going to go ahead and take some of that grease and put it in this pilot bearing here. Make sure it's nice and lubed up. So we lube it up here with this red grease, and what that's going to do is allow that input shaft of the transmission to align with this pilot bearing without binding up on installation. So you want to make sure you get a decent amount of grease there. Not so much to plug the hole, but just to make sure it's riding on enough grease, because it is going to be spinning in that pilot bearing. So make sure it's well lubricated all the way around. So all right, so that's good there. We're going to also lube our shaft, so that should be no problem. All right, so that's it. I'm going to go ahead and replace this pilot bearing now. It actually doesn't sound too happy. So yeah, for sure replace that. And we're going to retain our clutch fork. We're not going to worry about that. It's cast iron, so I'm not concerned about it bending. If it was a stamped steel, I would for sure want to upgrade it, but in this year and model, it's cast. So good with that. We'll just go ahead and replace this pilot bearing and then lube everything up. So let me get this off. All right, let's see. I'm just gonna pull it forward, and it's gonna come off the fork. The fork came off the pivot ball, and then we'll just put all this back together with the new bearing. Let's see. There's just these little retaining clips on the back here that hook on to this clutch fork. And right now it's off of the little pivot bearing, or excuse me, pivot ball, which is right here. We're going to make sure we lube that up too when we put it back together. So everything's going to get lubed. We're going to lube this shaft and this pivot ball. I'll probably clean it up a little more before I put this bearing on. Alright, so let me get to it. Alright fam, so we got our old throwout bearing here. Take a look at that. It's a little rough. Not sure if you can hear it, but yeah, definitely rough, so we want to replace that. We got our new one here, nice and quiet. It's full of grease, so it's not going to spin like the old one. But in order to get these replaced and switched out, it's going to have to be pressed. So you got to take this old collar out by pressing it out of the old bearing and pressing a new one on this collar here. So you either need a press like I'm using today. I just got a 12 ton press, so I'm going to use this to press it out. However, I've seen it done and done it myself with a ball joint press. If you get creative, you can use a ball joint press. Some people may try to hammer it out, but it's not advisable. You could damage it. You could damage the surface that the bearing's riding on. You could warp things. It's just not good to just beat on this with a hammer. You should really be pressing it. Although I'm sure it can be done. If you take care, you could probably do it with a hammer. But today we're just going to use a press. And what you want to do is find a socket. In this case, I'm using a 27 millimeter. It seems to fit well. Essentially, you want a socket that's just small enough to fit through the hole on the new throwout bearing, but not so small that it doesn't grab the race on this collar here. So this sleeve or collar, whatever you want to call it, you want it to be able to push against it in the press here, like that, forcing that collar out, and then we'll press it in again to this new throwout bearing. So let's get doing that now. I'm gonna jump right to it and get this set up.
So I'm just going to let that bearing, that old bearing, race, the outer race, lie on these here blocks. And then I'm going to put my socket, in this case again a 27 millimeter, because that seems to fit well for me. It may vary depending on what your sockets you're using. And then you could always take up some of this gap here to prevent yourself from having to press down so far by just grabbing another socket, a comparable socket that'll fit, and press against that as well to take up the gap. So let's just say this one here. It's not going to take long using this press because it really doesn't require that much power to push this out. But one thing you want to note is that you want to catch that collar on the bottom side to make sure that it doesn't hit the ground. You don't want it to get damaged when it comes out. So there you go. So I'll show you guys here. What we've done is just press this collar, which we're going to reuse, out of the old throwout bearing. So you just forced it through with a socket. Alright, so now we're going to take that, swap it out with the new one, and just do the opposite and press it back together using this press. Alright, so we're going to get started pressing this together. I'm just going to set it down here on the block. I'm going to set this collar inside of the bearing. So we found a socket that'll fit here. And now we're just going to press this thing back on. We're going to check that our bearing still moves nice and fluidly, no issues, and that's pretty much it. Now we're just going to put it back together. Alright, so we're back underneath. Again, we want to put this throwout bearing on, but we want to make sure everything's lubed up first. So we're going to get a big scoop of that high temperature lube, that red lube we used earlier, and put that same lube all over this shaft that this bearing rides on. Make sure you got it everywhere on there. Alright, we're going to put some here too, where this input shaft goes into that pilot bearing. So, same thing, make sure both surfaces are lubed up. Alright, now the last place we're going to lube, it's right here on this clutch fork. So we'll put a generous amount there as well. Alright. Okay. Now we're going to put this pilot bearing back on. So we're going to slide it on the shaft. And we're going to make sure these tabs are lined up with our clutch fork. So it'll ride somewhere like that there. So yeah, this is always hard trying to get this back on, especially when you can't see what you're doing. This would obviously be a lot easier if it was outside of the vehicle. So you're just gonna have to work it here until you get them clipped in. Alright, heard one side and the second side. So there we are. We're clipped in there
on that throwout bearing. And now, now I forgot to lube that pivot ball, so we're going to go ahead and throw some lube back there real quick. So yeah, that should have been done before I put this fork on, but I don't want to take it back off, so I'm just going to reach back there and throw some grease on it. Alright, now we're going to force it back on there. There we go. So now we're on that pivot ball. You see everything's all lubed up. I'm going to clean up some of this excess lube that's just laying around here. I don't want it to sling up on the clutch. I know it's unlikely that it'll sling onto the clutch, but I just as well clean it up from the areas that don't need it. So we're going to clean that up real quick. Just wipe it down with a little rag. Just the excess. Alright. Okay. I even throw a little bit more on here. So we make sure that transmission goes in easy for us. Alright, so we're back under the car. We're going to grab our flywheel and try to get this thing put in here. Alright, so we're back under the car with our flywheel. Although it's light, it's still heavy, so these things aren't very light. You're still talking 21 pounds. But we want to go ahead and put it on here on the back of the crank. And like I said, there's an alignment pin on the back of the crank here. I don't know if you guys can see. But we want to line that pin up with this hole here on the back of the flywheel. So I'm going to try to line that up there. So make sure it gets keyed right. There we go. So it's down. It's keyed in here with this whole alignment hole. All right, now that we got the flywheel here lined up on this alignment pin, we're gonna go ahead and put these bolts in. We're just gonna reuse the stock bolts. You could replace them if you like, but the stock should be fine. Notice I'm putting it in without Loctite first. Per the instructions, we're going to run it down to 70 foot-pounds, no Loctite. Then we'll back each one out, add some Loctite to it, and torque them all back down to 70 foot-pounds again. Alright, here we go. There's 70. I'm going to go directly across from that bolt. And then we're just going to go in the star pattern all the way around. Hopping back and forth until all of them are torqued to 70 foot-pounds. We're going to break them all free again. So starting here, I'm going to go ahead and apply some red Loctite. You can see it there, So this is a red Loctite high strength, high temperature. We're going to go ahead and put that on every bolt. So we're just going to put that on the bolt. Pretty liberal with it. Make sure you have enough on there. And we're going to put them back on just for sake of knowing what bolt we've done so far. I'm going to leave each bolt that I pull in just slightly out further than the ones that haven't been done yet. And that's my indication that they still need Loctite put on. So again, being generous here with my Loctite. And we're going to do this to all 9 bolts. All right. So we're going to do again our star pattern. Now, got them cinched up here. Torquing once again to 70 foot-pounds. Make sure you guys are using a good torque wrench here. You don't want no cheap torque wrench. You want to make sure you have a good quality torque wrench for an accurate torque. So I think I have all of them, so I'm just going to go around in a circle, see if I missed any. It's essential that you get every one of these torqued properly. Alright, so we went around, checked our torque twice. So we're good to go there. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and put the friction plate on. When you do this, you want to take care to read it and see where it's marked. To either say engine side or transmission side. And you want to make sure you have it put on correctly, because you don't want to have this on backwards. So make sure you take a look at it. In our case, you probably can't see it here, but it says TM side. And that's going to stand for transmission side. So we're going to have the spring side closest to the transmission, essentially. That's in this case, but each clutch disc is different, so make sure you look at yours and just read what side is marked either transmission or engine side, because it is directional. Alright, so we're going to go ahead now and install this using the clutch alignment tool. We're going to push that into the center of that pilot bearing. It may be a tight fit, so you may need to twist and wiggle to get it to seat in there properly. But you want to make sure it's in there good, so that way you got a good alignment. So that's essentially it. Now we're going to put the pressure plate and then bolt it up. This alignment tool again holding it in place while we put that pressure plate in to hold the whole assembly together. And that'll keep the input shaft aligned with the pilot bearing and help us get that transmission lined up when we go to reassemble it a little better. Okay. All right, so now we're going to get our pressure plate and we're going to line it up here with these pins on the flywheel. You see there. So we'll get them lined up here on the pressure plate. And these are unidirectional, I believe, so you're going to have to make sure you line them up the right way the first time, hopefully. Otherwise, you're going to spin it until you figure out which bolt holes are going to line up. I'm just going to get a couple started here just so it doesn't fall on me. And then I'll get it lined up a little better before I actually torque them down. All right, so now that we have it in this alignment tool comes in and out easily, we're going to go ahead and, since we already dry fit it, we're going to go ahead and Loctite these down now. So let me get some red Loctite, just like we did earlier. We're going to go ahead and put some Loctite on these. So I'm going to do, in this case, one at a time till I get all the way back to this alignment pin, and I'll just go either clockwise or counterclockwise. We'll keep going around as many times as it takes that they're all clicking at 11 foot-pounds. Check this one again. Make sure I don't miss any there. So I think we're good now. So we'll go ahead and all right, we'll go ahead and adjust our torque wrench to 30 foot-pounds now. They say between 28 and 32 foot-pounds. So I'm going to kind of go right in the center and put it at 30 foot-pounds. All right, so we got the torque wrench set to 30 foot-pounds now. We're just going to go back through and torque them all down again. This time to 30 foot-pounds. And this will be our last of the 2 passes. All right, so last few things we got to do here is put in the drive line and the exhaust Y pipe. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in now. Nothing really to note here besides there was a mark on our drive line that we want to align up with a mark that we made on our intermediate shaft. So we'll go ahead and stab the drive line in. And then we're going to find our mark here. And line those up. May need to rotate it, but that's pretty much it. All right, guys. So we're going to open up this fill plug and start filling this transmission up. I am tired of working on this right now. So I'm just going to fill this up until it comes out. Essentially is all you do. Once it comes out of the hole, it's full. And I'm using a Lucas, let's see, a Lucas 75W90 synthetic gear oil for trans and diff. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this up, and then probably just cut back to you guys once I got this thing back on the ground all filled up with all the oil, including engine oil, and then get ready for a test drive. All right, family, so I finally got that clutch done in the G35. I did the friction disc, the pressure plate, and the flywheel. And while we're in there, we also did the throwout bearing, and I did a new clutch hydraulic line on the slave cylinder. All the parts came from Z1 Motorsports, as you saw earlier in the video. But everything's back together, needless to say. I did, however, have a spongy clutch pedal, so I had to figure out what was going on. I had some air in the system, and I found out a trick in order to bleed your clutch properly. It'll work on any vehicle, but in this case, I was doing it on the G35. So if you're interested in this little trick to get your clutch bled properly, go ahead and hit me up in the comments below. And I'll either do a separate video on this, or I could just respond to your comment with the tips and tricks. Either way, hit me up if you're interested in how to bleed your clutch properly. I know there's a lot of people out there, especially with G35, that do some clutch parts and then their pedal's soft. So without further ado, I have the Infiniti out of the garage here.
and we're going to take it on its first test drive. I do admit though that I did drive it up and down the block briefly just to make sure it worked well, but I have not taken it on the highway, so we're going to do that now, get a couple miles under it and see how it shifts going down the highway. We'll go through every gear, but this is going to end the video, so I want to take this moment right now to tell you thank you for watching, and if you like what you saw today, go ahead and smash that like button, and as always, if you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, that notification bell, be notified of my next episode. I do drop bangers weekly, and I do apologize for not putting out a video fast enough this week, but I've been busy. I had a lot going on lately in my life, so it just took me a little while to get this video out. But again, I do drop videos weekly, so tap into the channel. All right, so let's get out on this test drive, and we'll see how this thing shifts. All right, family, so we're in the car now. I'm going to take it on its first test drive. Ran it through the first 3 gears. It seems to be shifting well. No issues there. Now, initially, when I took it for a drive, I had a really soft clutch pedal, but I went ahead and sorted that out. Like I mentioned earlier, it just wasn't returning, and it was very soft. So now it has a full return. It's not getting hung up halfway, so we're good there. I'm up to, let's see, 5th gear now. No issues. Going about 60 on the highway. Can't go much faster because we got a lot of traffic ahead of us here. Try to get over to this fast lane, but I'm not going to get on it. I'm not going to drive crazy, simply because there is a break-in period for the clutch. Keep that in mind. Typically there will be a break-in period of about 500 miles for a clutch, brand new clutch. You want to get that friction disc seated in nice and well on the 2 surfaces, your friction surfaces. That would be your flywheel and your pressure plate. You want to get a good break-in on that. So you want to drive it slow, you know, drive it like a grandpa, and not really get into it because you don't want to burn your clutch up prematurely. So we're in 6th gear now, driving down the highway. No issues, everything's working well. No vibrations, nothing funny going on. So I say this was a successful clutch install, and that's going to pretty much wrap it up for this video. I want to thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.